So we're going to get started today in Amazing Charts. So we've talked about in session 1 the integration between the two systems, and one of the pieces of the integration is the billing piece. So what we hope to have happen when you start using Amazing Charts is the provider is going to be working on the patient's encounter in Amazing Charts. And when they're ready to sign off on the patient's chart, they'll go to the bottom right-hand side of the screen under the Most Recent Encounter tab, and they're going to click on Sign Off. When they click on Sign Off, it's then going to display this screen here. And this is where the provider will be able to code the level of the visit for the patient. And they would also be able to select any additional CPT codes for the visit. And once they click off those CPT codes down here under the charge area, they'll be able to see the CPT codes they selected and the ICD codes that would then be attached to each one of the CPTs. When they're done completing everything on this screen is necessary, they will click on Sign It on the bottom right, and this is going to trigger Amazing Charts to take the charge details for that patient's visit and then transfer them over to Amazing Charts PM so that the biller would then be able to go into that visit in ACPM, review it, make any necessary modifications to it prior to billing it out of the system. So it could just be something as simple as adding a modifier before it's being transmitted out of ACPM. So when it comes time for the biller to go into ACPM and review charges for a data service, the recommendation is to have them run the billing reconciliation report in AC, because this billing reconciliation report tracks the electronic charges that are being sent from Amazing Charts to Amazing Charts PM. And not only will it show you the successful charges that went over to Amazing Charts PM, but it will also show you if any of the charges that were signed off on did not make it over to ACPM and why. So by default, when you come into the billing reconciliation screen, it shows you your successes, and the date range over here on the right defaults to today's date, but I expanded it a bit so that I could get my information to display. And this is not by service date necessarily, it's the date of the last attempt to transmit charges. So keep that in mind when you run this date range here. And it lists this report by patient name. It will give you the sign-off date and time, and then it will give you the data service. So if your providers are signing off on the same day, these two will match. If they do not, these will differ in certain circumstances. The CPT codes associated with it, units, and it will even give you the day and time stamp that it was received in ACPM. So this is a work list for the biller so that they know to take the information from this report, go into ACPM, and review the charges for these patients, batch up those charges, and transmit them to the clearinghouse. So the billing reconciliation report can be printed, and it can also be exported. But of course, it's going to also be very important to view your errors. And there are quite a few different error messages that you may encounter in AC on the billing reconciliation report. On the handout for today, I do list some of the more common error messages that clients receive when they run the errors for billing reconciliation. what they mean, and how you go about correcting those errors. So you can see here on the billing reconciliation error list that I just ran, again, it gives you the same information, but instead of telling you the time it was received by ACPM, it's giving you the time of failure and the error message. ACPM is typically, ACPM is unreachable, is typically a error message that you will receive when either the internet went down maybe at your office at the time the provider was signing off on the patient's encounter, or maybe there was just something between the two systems at the time of transmission that stopped it from going over to ACPM. So maybe there's not necessarily anything wrong, it was just a transmission error. The bill is already in ACPM and cannot be updated. So that means that this patient's data service has already been sent or entered in ACPM and it can't be resent. No effective usual charge found for procedure, and it would give you the procedure that does not have a usual charge. What this means is that there's no fee on your usual charge schedule in ACPM for that CPT code. So the system does require that there is a fee for every CPT code in ACPM in order for it to come over from AC. And then there's a few other common ones that clients receive. Another one is data service is prior to ACPM activation. What that means is before you are activated with ACPM, if your providers are not up to date with signing off on patients' encounters in AC, once you are installed with ACPM, anything that's signed off on prior to the activation date or install date with ACPM will not come over electronically. And we'll go over in a few minutes how you can go about entering manual charges for those scenarios if you come across it. So if it's an error that can be corrected, such as the ACPM is unreachable and the no effective usual charge found for procedure code, what you can do is you're going to go in and correct the error. So this error would live in ACPM. So we would go over to ACPM, we'd go into the administration section because that's where the usual charge schedule is located. We would go into the usual charge schedule and we would enter the fee for that CPT code. And we would hit save. Another common error you will get is ACPM object error not in reference to an object. Kind of a really crazy, not so obvious error message. Typically when you get that message, it means the patient does not have an account set up on their chart in ACPM. So like the usual charge, the account is a requirement in order for those charges to come over from AC. So if you get that vague message, go into the patient that errored out in ACPM and verify whether or not there is an account on their chart. If there is, you can still try to resend that patient's charge over from AC anyways. Because sometimes we find things just fix themselves. So now what I need to do, once I've made the corrections or I just want to try to resend the charge over from AC, is I have to go into each individual patient's account information screen in AC, and a quick way to get there is under the patient list. When you bring up the patient, left click or right click, excuse me, on your mouse, and you can launch directly right into that patient's account information screen in AC, instead of having to go through the chart first. And then once you're in there, it's going to bring up the data service, and you could change it if it's another different data service than the most recent one, but the most recent one displays in the data service. And you're going to go down to the charge box. You're going to click in the unit box, backspace the number of units, put the number of units back in, and then hit save on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. The system's going to tell you replacing any previous information for 210 with the current information. Are you sure you want to save the changes? And you want to hit yes, I want to save the changes. And by doing that, you are triggering AC to resend that patient's charge details over to ACPM. So again, you would do that for each one of the patients under the error list. And then hopefully, of course, the next time that you run your successes, that patient will show up under your success list instead of the error list. And of course, if there are certain patient charges that you just can't seem to get over to ACPM, the recommendation is to just put them in manually. We could definitely research it for you if there are a lot of them that aren't going over and you can't seem to get them over, but there may be certain circumstances where you just can't get it over from time to time, and the best bet is to just put them in manually. But that shouldn't occur very often. So once you're done working your errors and you have your success list, you're going to go into ACPM and you're going to work off that list. So you would go into front desk and pull up the first patient on the list and launch their chart. You'll locate the visit under the visit history pane in their chart, and you'll go over to where it says action and you'll select view change. The view change launches you into the charge processing screen. So you'll see that the charge processing screen is broken up into 3 sections: the case, visit, and charge summary. The case summary is just the case details for the patient's visit. So depending on the case type for that patient's visit, there may be some additional information that is required to be entered before billing. Otherwise, if it's a standard case type, you can jump down to visit, and the visit pulls the chief complaint from AC if one was entered. It will put the billing office, service location, billing provider. It'll pull over the diagnosis that the provider entered in the patient's encounter. Over on the right here, you'll see there's a prior auth box, a referring provider field, and any charge that comes over electronically from AC should be in an accept assignment as assigned status. And you can make any necessary changes to the visit area of the charge if it was necessary. So if you thought the provider missed a diagnosis code, you could put that in any of the blank diagnosis boxes. If you want to remove a diagnosis code, you just click in the diagnosis field and backspace it, because everything's already in an editable format for you. When you're done reviewing the visit section, you can then go down to the charge details, so that's the CPT code. By default, the system will highlight the first CPT code in the box and bring up the details in an editable format down here. So you can see the service date, place of service, rendering provider, service dates, procedure code, So here's where you'd be able to add modifiers if necessary. The diagnosis field allows you to see the diagnoses that are linked to this CPT code. Keep in mind, you can only have 4 diagnoses linked to an individual procedure. So if there were more than 4 diagnoses checked off in this box here, you would have to uncheck the additional diagnosis code so that there were only 4. Units, the amount, and this is pulling from the usual charge schedule for this procedure code. The payer, this is pulling from the patient's insurance setup on their chart, and you can see the subsequent payers in the drop down. And then we give you an adjustment box on this screen in case you need to do an adjustment at this time. You'd be able to choose the payer, the adjustments for, the reason code, and this is pulling from your journal reason table in administration. We, by default, put in a handful of journal reasons for you, but if you want to add more journal reasons, you can easily do that under the administration, advanced setup, journal reason table management. And then you can go down and click on the second CPT if there is one, and do the same thing, review the information. You'll want to save if you make any changes. If you want to delete a CPT code, you can just highlight it and hit delete. If an additional CPT code needs to be added, maybe an administration code, you can come down and hit add, and the system will allow you to add an additional CPT code. If you need to reorder the CPTs, when you click on a CPT code, this drop-down arrow located at the end of the charge summary allows you to reorder the CPTs if necessary. If you want to indicate that the patient had a copay or coinsurance responsibility for this visit, down here you can click on copay. Make sure that you select the CPT that the copay or coinsurance would most likely go out to. And when you click on copay, you'll notice that you get 3 additional fields: the patient copay due, patient deductible due, and patient coinsurance due. And this information is pulling based on the setup on the patient's account for that insurance. So if it says copay here, it should pull in the copay box here. If there was a coinsurance indicated, it would show up in the coinsurance or deductible. So this is basically splitting the ticket. Then you can go ahead and hit save on the bottom right. And one of 2 things are going to happen if you choose to split out the copay. The first will be the payment entry. If the patient has no money already in their unapplied bucket, the system's going to bring up this screen, which is the payment screen, and it's asking you, do you want to enter a payment at this time to fulfill some of this patient's responsibility? Because in addition to the 20 that I just put out to the patient, looks like the patient has additional responsibility. So depending on the workflow in your practice, if the back end of the office is going to be entering in the copayment amount for the patient's visit at the same time, they can easily do that right from this screen. In the payment type drop-down, they would select the payment method, and you can override the payment amount if they were just entering in the payment for today's responsibility. Payment date will default to today's date, but that can be changed if necessary. And then if you want to print out a receipt, you could, but typically at this time, you wouldn't be printing out a receipt because the patient wouldn't be there to take it. And then you could put in some payment notes if you'd like. Then you're going to hit save on the bottom right. And you're going to get this payment application screen. So you would get this payment application screen if you entered a payment at this time, or if the patient already had money in their unapplied bucket. So this allows the biller to apply any unapplied money to the patient's outstanding balances. And this payment application screen is really nice because it breaks down the patient's responsibility by date of service, procedure code. It even shows you the insurance balance for the date of service and CPT, and then you can decide where you want to apply that money. So if it was defaulting to the current date of service, that's great, you can leave it there. Otherwise, you could change it and have it go into another field. And then you'll also notice that there's an adjustment box in case you also needed to do an adjustment. And then you can hit save on the bottom right, and it will apply that money, and then you'll be redirected back to the patient's chart. So again, it really all depends on whether the front office is going to be entering in the co-payments when the patient checks in, or the back end is going to take on that responsibility. But regardless, if you split that co-payment, you will get one of those two scenarios. You'll see for the patient's visits, there's some additional actions you can take. You could drop it to paper if it typically goes out electronically, but you need a paper claim. You could select one of these options here. If you want to add notes for this patient's visit, because you need to track something, you could put notes. Also, if something was required to go out on the electronic claim, additional claim information perhaps, you would also utilize the notes field. There's a note type. Called ANSI claim note that would allow you to put in content for that claim. And I do put it on 2 different cheat sheets that you get throughout your training, how you would go about setting up electronic notes, or even if you needed a note to print on the paper claim form. I believe it's in session 1 cheat sheet, administration, and also it'll be on the cheat sheet for session 4 for payment posting. You could also just print out a general receipt, or you could clone it. And clone is really only used in circumstances where maybe you need to separate the claim. It basically creates a copy of that visit. So that's electronic charges that come over from AC. Next, I want to talk about manual charge entry. So manual charge entry would be used in circumstances when either the provider signed off on the patient's encounter after the activation date. So in that billing reconciliation error log, you see data service is prior to ACPM activation, or if it's something that does not require an encounter. So if you bill patients for no-shows, medical records, retail services, etc., or your provider doesn't sign off on hospital visits or certain other service locations, those could also potentially be manually entered as well. So if you have to manually enter a charge for a patient, you would pull up the patient in ACPM, launch their chart, go under the account that you want to enter the charge for, and click on the charge entry link. It's going to bring you to a charge processing screen where it just pulls in the patient's name, their age, the account you selected. This is where you can then select a previous case or a new case for this patient's charge, and then visit would be left at new visit because it's a new charge. You would then hit save on the bottom right, and now you're going to see that the other three charge screens, populate for you. And the only difference between, the electronic charge and the manual charge is the electronic charge brings a lot of the information over for you, whereas the manual charge, you have to populate everything yourself in the necessary fields. So again, under the case summary, you would fill in any necessary case details. The visit, you would want to select the billing office. You would select the location that you're billing for. Provider. You'd put in the diagnosis code, and I'm going to bill this patient for a no-show. So usually I recommend to clients that if you do have circumstances where you have to bill for those types of services, that you create a dummy diagnosis code, and you can make a very general one called miscellaneous, because every CPT code in ACPM has to be connected to at least one diagnosis. And then once I fill in my visit information, I can hit save on the bottom right, and then it'll bring up my charge summary screen. Please be aware of the date of service. It will populate today's date. If you want to change it, you can backdate it. Maybe this patient no-showed on February 1st. And then in the procedure, you would search for the procedure code. And I have a dummy no-show fee. You'll be able to see the diagnosis linked, the fee. Be aware of the payer field because it will default to the primary insurance on the patient's account setup. I'm billing the patient. Again, if I needed to add an additional CPT code, I could hit add. Otherwise, I can just hit save. And if I'm done, I can just keep hitting save. And once again, you'll get the same payment entry screen or payment application window. If the patient has outstanding balances, it's going to ask you if you want to enter a payment or apply a payment. If you don't, in either scenario, just hit cancel. And then it will bring you back to the patient's chart. And here is that new visit I entered for 2/1. And here's the $30 out to the patient. So that is an electronic charge review and also a manual charge entry. You can set up some defaults when doing manual charge entry, and those defaults are all driven under the bookkeeping screen of ACPM. You'll see there's some bookkeeping defaults, and this allows you to put in a default billing office, a default service location, provider, transaction date, service date, and you can even link transactions to batches that you've set up under the administration posting batch table, so that any transactions that you do, these will be the defaults unless otherwise it's an electronic charge. And this is great if you're entering a stack of hospital charges for a provider. This allows you, when you're on that charge screen, you don't have to manually select the location billing provider each and every time. But keep in mind, these bookkeeping defaults will stay like this until you change them back. So it looks like someone has a question, so I'm going to just take a moment and look at the questions. How to fix a patient payment if it's attached to the wrong charge? That's a great question, and we definitely go over that in session 4. So I would rather wait and review that in session 4, or if you had already attended a session 4 and you don't plan on attending it again, just shoot me an email after today's session and I can definitely answer that for you. But that's not something that we necessarily talk about in this session. That is covered in the payment section. Also, what you can do if you have attended session 4, the payment application reference document actually talks about how to correct incorrect payments. So if you have that cheat sheet already, you can definitely look at that and it will tell you how to fix that. Thank you. So now let's go over how to batch up your charges. Because of course, after we review these charges or enter our manual charges, we want to get them out the door and forwarded to the clearinghouse. So we're going to go to billing, billing activities, select claims. When you get to the screen, you'll notice that you have some filter options to select from when running your batch. You don't have to select any of these besides the claim date. It is required, and usually the claim date is just going to be today's date. And you can either type it in, hit T as a quick key, or use the calendar. If you tend to be a day behind in your billing review, you'll want to change the date of service to yesterday's date so that you don't pull any charges for today, because it will if you put in today's date. Otherwise, if you're always on target, you can put in today's date. And then this date of service from, this would really be from the first day that you started reviewing and entering in charges. So it would really put anything in this batch that's either a new charge or maybe a charge that you had to correct and resubmit. So if you wanted to just focus on charges for this date of service in this batch, again, you'd want to be very specific about your date range. And then you can see some of the other filter options that you can use if and when necessary. You can even batch up a charge for a specific patient. And then once you're done filling out your claim criteria, you're going to hit save on the bottom right, and you're going to wait for your refine claim selection screen to display. And this is going to show you the patient's charges that are going to be batched up. It tells you that they're going to be selected, the visit date, visit number, chief complaint, location, provider, patient number, patient name, and the plan associated with the patient's charge. So obviously, depending on how many charges that are to go out, this could be, 10, 15, 20, 30 different charges. I only have 2. If when you are reviewing the Refine Claim Selection screen, you notice that there is a charge or charges that should not go out in this batch, you can actually take them out at this time by clicking on it. And if you want to select multiple, just hold down your control key and highlight all of the ones that you want to select, and then hit toggle selection down here on the left. By clicking on toggle selection, it changes the selected field from yes to no. So it doesn't remove them from the screen, it just changes the selection status, indicating that these will not be batched up. And if you change your mind, you can just do the same thing. Reselect them and hit toggle again, and it goes back to yes. And again, if you did have a lot of different charges in this list, you can sort them by clicking on any of these headers just to help you organize your claim selection review. Once you're done reviewing your claims, you would now hit save on the bottom right, And you're going to wait until the system tells you that your claims have been successfully auto-rendered. That means that they've been now batched up. So we can get out of the screen now by Xing out in the top right and returning back to the billing screen. And now we have to validate that batch. So the validation process happens under the Manage Claim Batches pane. The default buy is electronic, not transmitted for all practices. And we want to leave this as such because this is an electronic claim batch and it has not been transmitted yet. So when you hit search, it's going to display all of your batches. Now keep in mind, I'm in a practice environment, so I have a lot of not transmitted batches. Of course, in your live environment, I wouldn't want to see so many. And again, you can sort any of this information, so I resorted it to show today's claim batches. And they are separated by provider, so keep in mind if you have more than one provider in the practice, it will separate the claims by provider in its own batch. And then the action, you're going to have a delete and a validate option. I want to click on validate so that ACPM will scrub my claims in that batch, and it will let me know if there are any errors. If there are any errors when the claim validation report displays on your screen, you will see underneath the patient that has errors, the error message or messages in black and italicized. So again, there are some common validation errors that clients get, and I do list them in the reference document for today and how to go about, correcting those errors. So we can see for Shelley Smith, it says missing plan, street, address, city, state, postal code. I'm missing other plan, city, state, street, postal code. And what that means is for this patient's primary and secondary insurance, there is no address in the plan table for those insurances. So back in session 1, during the client table review, I talked about making sure before you're installed that all of the plans that you are going to be billing out of ACPM are in that plan table, for 1, and 2, all of them have addresses and telephone numbers. Because if they don't, they're going to kick out during the validation process. So to really be proactive, it's really good idea to make sure that your top plans have addresses in there. Otherwise, if you get that validation error at this time, you'll have to delete the entire batch because one bad apple spoils the bunch. So if I had 50 patients in the batch and just that one patient had an error, I have to delete the whole batch. So you'd go back wherever the error lives. So that error is in administration, plan table management. I'd click show advanced search and look for the insurance. And I'm going to look for it by description. I just typed in MED and hit enter until the screen refreshed. And here's my med partners that this patient has. And yep, there's no address. And of course, I don't really know the real address, so I'm just putting a fake one in. And you do have to include the last 4 digits. And while I'm in here, I'm going to just put the phone number in too. And then hit save. It also said that her secondary insurance was missing. So I can pull up Shelley Smith's chart, and she's got Blue Cross Blue Shield Connecticut. And I do want to show you a nice little shortcut. So if I had to go and find out what Shelley Smith's secondary was, I can click on the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Connecticut on her chart. And then once I'm in the Manage Insurance section, I can click on the plan in the plan field. And down here at the bottom, I can take a shortcut to the table for that plan. So instead of having to go into administration in the plan table and try to find it in the advanced search, which can be a little tedious, I can access it right from the patient's chart by clicking on it and then going to manage table, and it directs me right to that plan in administration. And then once I'm done correcting any of my validation errors, I'm going to go back to billing, I'm going to go back to select claims, and I'm just going to run my claim batch again. So here's Shelley Smith. I can hit save again, wait till it says auto rendered, get out of here, go back to manage claim batches. Here's my new claim batch, and hopefully the next time I validate it, it will pass the scrubbing process. Great. And you'll know once your batch has passed the validation process because A, you won't see any more errors on your validation report, but another quick way to know if you had a lot of patients on this report, under the action for the batch, you'll now notice that it no longer says delete, validate, it says transmit, delete, and summarize. That's indicating to you that all of the charges in that batch pass the validation process. So now you can click on transmit and transmit it to the clearinghouse. You could always delete it if you decided not to transmit it after all, or you can click summarize, and the summarize is just a copy of that validation report that was run. You can always come back and do that. Don't forget after you're done working your electronic claim batches that you go to the buy and you change it to paper unprinted in case there are scenarios where any of the claims in your claim batch may be paper claims. And you do the same thing. You're going to validate your paper claims, and then when they pass the validation process, your actions will change to print with form, mark it complete. You can again delete it, align it, or run a validation report. And then once your electronic claims are transmitted and your papers are printed, they just go into a different status in the buy drop-down. And you can always go back and see previously transmitted and previously printed batches. So now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to launch into the clearinghouse portal and see for those claims that were forwarded to the clearinghouse, once they got there and they were validated by the clearinghouse, were they all forward on to the payer, or are they stuck in the error bucket at the clearinghouse waiting for someone to review and correct the errors? So it's very important whether you do it, a couple of minutes after you transmit your batches, a day after, that you're always logging into the clearinghouse and you are reviewing your claim batches to make sure that everything is being forwarded. So before we do that, I just want to go over some questions that people have. Just to verify, when you toggle a patient, it will come back next time to be sent. Yes. So I think you're asking when you are batching up claims, if you toggle out a patient from that batch, will they just come back into the claim selection the next time around? And that is correct. It just removes them from this batch. If that wasn't your question, please send it again and just clarify a little bit more. So let's go into the portal now. And everybody should have received a username and a password for the portal by your practice management implementation specialist, along with the link to access the portal. So once you go to the portal and you log in, you will be brought to the home screen, and this is the home screen of the portal. You'll be able to see your practice over here on the top right and what you're logged in as. To review your claim batches, you're going to go to search up at the top here, and you're going to click claim file. And I do put all of this in today's reference document as well. So once you click on search claim file, it shows you your search results over here. So I'm working in the claim file because it has this little indentation and it's highlighted in blue showing me what search results I selected. And then you'll see that there's some filters here. Now, right now it's only showing me claim files from 2.3 to 2.10. If I want to change this, which I have to in my training environment, I can click on the pencil to edit the criteria for this claim file search. Over here on the right, it's asking me for the search details. And right now, it defaults to only unarchived claim files because there is a way that, when you're done working with a batch, that you can archive it so that it gets removed from your work list. And you can always go back and look at anything that was archived. And you'll also see here that you have the option to even look at both statuses. So I want to leave it at unarchived, but I need to change my upload dates. I'm going to go back a year, and that's the limit. You can only go back up to a year at one time. So once I change my search, I can hit claim file down here because it's just asking me now where do I want to go, and I want to go right back to claim file. It's going to refresh. Oh, it's because I didn't change. Go back a year. That's better. So here's what the screen will look like when there's claim batches. Again, you could filter by any of these options up at the top, otherwise it's just going to show you everything. The type is just marking that's a professional claim. This is the file name, so it's your batch. Here's the date it was uploaded and time to claim remedy. The username, you may see an FTP username, and that is just the user that we set up for all of our clients so that the system can actually transmit claim batches over to the portal. Whereas if somebody actually worked a batch, it would have that username on it. If there are any errors associated with the batch, it's going to have the dollar amount under the error column. The status, and there's a few different statuses that batches can be in. Ready to edit means that there are errors in that batch and it's ready for someone to review it. Resolved means all of the claims in the batch pass the validation process and have been forwarded. Locked for editing means that somebody is reviewing or has reviewed that batch. And file change means that someone made changes to a claim or claims in that batch. The total is the total amount of claims in the batch. Forwarded to payers, how many out of the total were forwarded, how many have errors, how many were removed, and we'll talk about when and why you would remove claims in a moment, and how many were fixed. So that means somebody either corrected or modified a claim or claims in that batch. If you want to drill down and see the patients associated with that batch, that's what these arrows are over here on the left. it allows you to expand. And now I can see it on a claim, individual patient claim level. And you can see it by status. You have options on different screens on how much information you can view at once, and you go to different pages. You'll notice here that I could export this grid if I wanted to and save it or print it. Anywhere in Claim Remedy that you see the claim ID link, it allows you to launch directly into that individual patient's claim details. And this is if you needed to see specific information about that claim. You can see all of the different general information, subscriber information, patient information. You can see the audit history. And then over here on the left, it allows you to even look at other details. You can view it on a form if you wanted to print this. You could see an audit report. You could see or add notes. You have the ability to assign claims to other users that have access to your practice and assign a due date and give them a note. Any assignments that were given to somebody would be viewable on the home screen of Claim Remedy. I could archive this claim, or if there was a payment already made for this claim, I could actually click on View Our ERA. I'd actually be able to see the ERA that this claim was on. So anywhere where you see that claim ID is going to give you access to that screen there. If you just want to run a report that shows all of the claims in the batch, or all the claims that were forwarded, or all the claims with errors removed or fixed, you can click on any of these numbers and a report will show up in front of you based on that information. So the first one gives you everything. And you can see all the different ways that you can export the file. If you want to work the file by batch, so if you want to launch into the entire batch, and we'll use this one right here that needs to be edited, you can just click on the claim batch. And now it's going to direct me to the claim file editor screen, where I can view the errors, the information of the batch, and by default, it's going to have you view everything by the error message. So here are the different errors associated with this claim batch. There's something wrong with the subscriber, something wrong with the NPI, invalid zip codes, and it tells you the severity of the error over here, whether it's a warning or it's a fatal error. It tells you the status of the error, and then it even tells you whether that error can be edited from the portal and whether it can be edited for a specific patient or to multiple claims. Each one of these icons indicates something different, and when you hover over it, it tells you what it means. If you want to see it by claim, you can change it to claim by clicking on the claim, and you'll now see that this is highlighted in green. And now it's breaking it down by the claim level. And whether you look at it on the claim level or the error level, you're going to have those arrows once again that allow you to expand so you can see the information underneath it. So here are all the patient, or if it's an individual patient, that has this error message. So if it's a warning severity and you think that this error is not correct, you'll see there's an override option. So you could select the claim or claims, hit override, and it would override this warning and still forward it to the payer. Again, if you want to assign it from here to somebody in your practice to work the claim, you could check it off and click assign. Or if you want to remove a claim, you can remove it, which would basically mean it would remove it from this batch. If you want to work it, you can click on the edit template icon over here on the left, and it will now bring up an edit template screen that allows you to make the changes right from within the clearinghouse. It would tell you if it was an error that couldn't be corrected in the clearinghouse. So you would select either the claim or claims that you wanted to correct. So if it was something that could be selected, corrected by multiple patients or multiple claims, you can select it. And then the editor will show up down here that needs to be corrected. And then once you make the changes, you can hit save on the bottom, and it will say edit was successful. And when you close out of the edit template, when you come back to this screen here, it's going to change the status to completely changed. So it really just depends on how you want to work your claim batches, and more importantly, your errors. Do you like to work them by error message? Do you like to work them by individual claims? And then sometimes it depends on what information do you want to look at to investigate that error. Because again, from here, anything that you see highlighted is a link. So this brings you again to that same claim view that we saw on the previous screen. Here's those assign, override, and remove options. You'll also see on the top right here, you have the ability to run reports by the statuses of the claim and the claim batches. You can get a general summary of the claim batch with all of the error messages. You can have it specific to anything that had errors, and you would want to use this if you are going to be correcting the errors in ACPM. Some clients like the ability to correct errors in the clearinghouse, but others, and my recommendation is to go back to the source. So, run the error report and then take those errors and correct them in ACPM and retransmit the claim. So that's what the error report would be good for. And the audit would just show everything that was done to that claim batch, errors and changes that were made. These icons over here, again, all represent different things. This allows you to close this screen and re-scrub the claim batch. So if you were able to work every single one of the errors in this claim batch, you want to now re-scrub it. If you only worked certain errors in the claim batch, you'll want to make sure that you remove anything that should not be re-scrubbed. Because you don't want it to re-scrub it because you didn't, correct anything. This option here allows you to remove anything that can't be fixed in the clearinghouse. So if it's something that can't be corrected, it'll automatically remove it for you. Locks for editing basically means that you don't allow anyone else to work this claim batch, only you. Over here on the left, you'll notice there's a summary link. And again, this just allows you to look at this claim batch a different way. You can look at it by a bar chart, and you can click on any of these links. Are all hyperlinks. And then you can look at it again by claim, and you could click on the claim ID to get the claim detail. You can also do some customization in the clearinghouse. Over here under the search details where we were before, we talked about just changing the quick search options, but over here on the left, you'll see that I have some save search, because if you want to create new searches, you can actually click on the search field and customize your own filters that you want to use to run this claim file or anything else in the clearinghouse. It'll show you all of the options available. And when you click on something, it'll move it over here and it'll put a check mark indicating that you added that to your search details. And then you can save any of these, and then they'll always show up under your saved. And you can even add favorites. So as you work your claim batches, once you start putting them in different statuses, again, if you now want to go over to ACPM and make your corrections, you can either print a report from the previous screen or back on this screen for the claim batch. You can click on any of these links here and you can use that list and print it so that when we go over to ACPM, we know what we have to correct. And again, in that cheat sheet for today, I put some of the most common validation errors that you get at the clearinghouse level and how you go about fixing those in ACPM. And then you'll also see on the screen that there's some additional options that you can do on the top right corner. And over here on the left, underneath claim file, there is an additional claim option. So once again, right now we're looking at it by claim batch. But if I change this option to claim, it now puts it by claim. It'll still show me the batch that the claim is in, but it's also giving me the patient details, date of service, billed amount, if it was paid, payer name, status, provider for that claim batch, for all the claim batches, excuse me. And once again, you can take action on any of these using the different options along the top here. Another one of the cheat sheets for today is the claim remedy manual. Please make sure that you read that manual. It's very useful because it tells you what all these different icons mean. I mean, you can also find out when you just click on them, but when you left click on any one of these, it'll highlight it and then you can select an option up here. Otherwise, if you click on the claim ID, it'll launch you into that individual patient's claim summary, or if you click on the file name again, it'll bring you to that same screen that we looked at before, where you are able to view the errors and do or take action. So there's a lot of different things you can do in the claim remedy portal. It really just depends how you're going to work your claims. So let's jump back to ACPM for a moment, because I want to just go over what happens or what you're going to do if you do have to make corrections in ACPM. So if you had your error list or your removed list, you'd come over to ACPM, and for each individual patient, you would pull them up and fix the error where it lives. So if it had something to do with the subscriber number, you'd obviously go into that patient's insurance setup and fix the subscriber number, which is the policy ID, and save. If it had something to do with the billing provider's NPI, you'd go into administration under provider table and fix the billing provider's NPI or the referring provider's NPI. If you get a segment line error message, it means that you have too many diagnoses attached to an individual procedure line. So you'd have to go into the individual patient, find the date of service, go to the view and change, and make sure only 4 diagnoses are linked to each procedure, and save. And once you've made your corrections for all those patients that are on that list, you have to go into their chart one by one, click on the claim history pane, find the date of service and the claim date associated with it, and hit void. Not resubmit, but void. Resubmit is only used when you need to send the patient's claim out exactly the same way or exactly, how it was originally sent. So that would be a circumstance where, you resubmitted a claim and it kicked out because the payer was not approved yet for electronic claim submission. Maybe you haven't been approved for all of your payers yet. So once it got to the clearinghouse, you got a error saying that, payer not approved yet. Or if you called the payer and they said that they never received the claim, you need to send that back up. Otherwise, if you need any type of change, you're going to void it. And then once you void, the next time you go and you select your claim batches, that will show up in your claim batch link. And you'll retransmit it, and then hopefully the second go around or transmission, it will be in a status of resolved in the next claim batch. And then of course, once all of your claims are forwarded to the payer, you're going to get payer response reports acknowledging that they received a batch of claims or a claim. And you can get payer response reports in the clearinghouse under search response reports because, all claims or electronic claims for that matter have to go through the clearinghouse. All response reports have to go through the clearinghouse. But you don't have to review response reports in the clearinghouse. You can actually review them right in ACPM. And because I can't get response reports in my training environment, I'm just going to briefly bring up the PowerPoint for today that you can all take back with you and show you what it's going to look like when you get those payer response reports in ACPM. So here's my PowerPoint. I'm just going to go down a bit. So here we are. So here is where you will see the payer response reports. In ACPM, it's under billing as well, managed claim reports. So you'll want to go in there on a normal basis and you will want to hit search. It'll tell you the name of the batch. It'll just say report, the date. It'll mark whether or not it's been read. And then under action, you'll want to click on view report for each one of them and bring up the report. So here's just a general example of a payer response report. Looks like every other one. It'll tell you the batch, the payer, the patients, and most payers just say whether or not they acknowledge that they received it. And then if everything's all set, you can mark it red so that you know if you look at this again that it's already been worked and read. There is a delete option, but I even say right here that we don't recommend you delete payer response reports because these can be used to go to timely filing. Or I can't think of the word I'm thinking of right now, but fight timely filing. But if you did accidentally delete it, that's what's great about having access to the clearinghouse. You can always go back into the clearinghouse and get that report, and I give you step-by-step instructions on how to go in and get that. And then finally, also under the billing screen, you can run a batch of statements. So just like the claims, you're going to go under billing activities and hit select statements. There's some filters you can use, but again, really you only need to put statement date and you can mark it as today. So any statements that are ready to generate as of today's date, and you can put some statement notes in. When you hit save on the bottom right, you'll be redirected back to the billing screen, and then under manage statements, you will see your statement batch. The amount of statements in it, the dollar amount, and then under action, you can click on view to view all of the statements in that batch and or print them. Summarize is really just a report with the summary information for that statement batch, the recipient, responsible party number, insurance balance, patient balance, and the grand total. And this grand total matches the statement amount and dollar amount. Void is if you decide not to run that batch of statements after all. And again, just like toggling out a claim, they'll show up the next run. And then done is what you're going to mark when you're done working a batch of statements. And then this was already discussed in session 2, but if a patient calls and has questions about a statement, you can always go into that individual patient's chart under the statement history pane, find the statement date and amount, click on view, and you'll be able to bring up the copy of the statement that that patient received. And there is some customization that you can do for statements under administration, billing, statement strategy management. We set up some defaults to have certain information pull and a default billing cycle and a default minimum balance, but you can change these if you wish to do so.